Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Lenara's Fluor Green the 25th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of Theros Ironfeld by Perrin. I would like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga members, and invite you to consider becoming a member by visiting the link in the description below. You can even pick up DragonLance gaming materials using my affiliate links. Now, this is my perspective only, and if you have thoughts or disagree with mine, I invite you to share them in YouTube chat, or if you're not joining us live, in the comments below. It's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. And let's talk a little bit about Theros Ironfeld. So really quick, this, again, is not a pre-written review. This is just me sharing my thoughts after having read it. And when I say read, I kind of actually mean listening to it on the way to and from work for a while. I can hear people outside, so hopefully that doesn't bleed into the stream at all. And this is kind of bright. Let me pot it down, bring it down just a little bit. All right, Theros Ironfeld. All we really know about Theros is from the modules and the novels in the Chronicles. And so when I first saw that there was a novel about Theros Ironfeld, I thought it was going to be like after the War of the Lance. Like, you know, maybe how did he get his silver arm? And then what was his life like after the war? Because he forged dragonlances. He must be wildly famous. And yet we never hear anything about him at all. Kind of strange if you ask me, but okay. That's not actually what this novel's about at all. This novel is about him, his life from being ostensibly a slave in a minotaur ship, where I think he signed up originally. Sorry, I gotta take my shoes off. He signed up originally as like a ship hand and into like a minotaur vessel. And that quickly turned him into a slave because they're minotaurs and they're slavers. They deal in slave trade like the ogres. And almost everyone on minotaur ships, except for the minotaurs, are slaves. They'll go to port, they'll like capture a bunch of people, enslave them, and then just use them for a while. And then if they don't win their own freedom or they're not murdered, then they might be able to eventually get out of indentured servitude, but probably not. And that's just minotaur culture. And so seeing Theros as a slave, and immediately he becomes endeared toward his minotaur slavers, because he warns the captain, the minotaur captain, about a possible attack from one of the other slaves. This turns him against the other slaves, and it actually brings what I thought was the weakest part of this entire novel itself, Sargonas, into play. Theros Ironfeld, as a little boy, is contacted by the god Sargonas, Sargaz, as the Minotaur nation knows him, and just straight up tells him, hey, thanks for saving my captain. You're like an honorable dude, which by honor they mean protect the slavers. Okay. How about you serve me? And he's like, there's no gods. I don't know what you are, but you're definitely not a god, because there are no gods. The Seekers have told us. And Sargonas like basically proves that he's a god. And so Theros Ironfeld devotes himself to be a follower of this god, really thinking it's the only god, because again, this is a time when there are no gods known on Krynn. Even though the more novels we read, they leak their knowledge out to a whole bunch of people as these novels progress and have been writing it. So I found it very frustrating that a god would be so forthright and forthcoming to a rando dude. They reference him as a individual of destiny, because of course we know he forges dragonlances, but they don't know what that destiny might be. And if they do, for some reason, Sargonas is okay with helping the dude that will ultimately overthrow him and his queen. But okay. So this starts Theros' career as a shipmate in the Minotaur nation and becoming wildly popular amongst the Minotaurs. He wins his freedom, but he continues to work. He apprentices under some of the blacksmiths and learns all of their tricks and techniques. He goes to war with them and fights with them in their war against the elves and wins renown, and just becomes this loved human that his crafting is spread all across to Mithras and Kothas throughout the entire area. And it gets to a point where he starts to go look to start up his own shop. He's won his freedom. Everyone he knows is off doing, greater and grander things as they're being called to war, to the War of the Lance. And so he ends up in Sanction, actually working there. He gets conscripted after this dude like burns down his shop, and he ends up working for Morgoth himself, and ultimately working with the bad guys, making them weapons against his will. He doesn't really have a choice because they'll kill him if he tries to leave or if he rejects their offer, but he can actually make a good living if he actually goes along and does it. So he's constantly trying to get out of this clear servitude to the dark forces. And by leaving, Sargaz gets all pissed off at him because he's, clearly not being honorable according to Sargaz, and protecting Minotaurs and Minotaurs' desires, which is ultimately, in this case, to overthrow the nation with the Dark Queen's forces, the dragon armies. He gets conscripted again with the elves and helps them build pieces for the ships so that they can evacuate Quillinesty and go to southern Aragoth. And he ends up going back to Solace. In Solace, he is constantly run into people who are threatening him, like, I know who you are, and there's a bounty out on you from, the dragon armies who want to find you. But if you work for me, I won't tell anyone else. That's sort of his life story. And so he starts working for a few Master Toda and making weapons. He doesn't know for whom, and it ends up being draconians. He runs across this draconian band attacking elves, and so he sort of kills one of the draconians, and that turns him on the side of the elves, and he realizes that he has his own sense of honor, and it's not with the dragon armies or Sargaz, it's with the light. And he actually gets killed. Of course, they cut off his arm, and he's bleeding out, and he's dying in Solace when the dragon armies attack Solace when the heroes are off in Zaxxaroth. And he is sort of met by this pantheon of gods. Sargaz is like, well, you didn't do what I wanted you to do, but you are a man of destiny, so here are all of the gods as they all appear around this one dude. He's like, choose one to worship. And he's like, you should probably worship Reorx. And he's like, I don't really want to worship Reorx. And Reorx is like, he's not really my thing, even though he would be the perfect person for Reorx, because he's a blacksmith, and he forges the dragonlances, which would make sense. But no, he goes with, guess which god? That's right, Mishakal. Because he's got a hurt arm. And who else could heal his arm except for Mishakal? And so he worships Mishakal. She brings him back to life. And then, of course, we know his trajectory up until they get to Foghaven Vale. And that was kind of this story. It was everything preceding the War of the Lance, after he got his arm cut off, and he was healed by Goldmoon in the slave caravan heading towards Pax Tharkaz. And we don't hear anything else. It would have been nice to have like a bookend of, oh yeah, and this is him once he got to Foghaven Vale, how he got the silver arm of Karaz, or it's a hammer of Karaz, the silver arm of Aragot? Oh my gosh, I can't remember what the silver arm's name is. Ooh. Well, in any case, how he got that silver arm, and then, what it was like trying to forge these dragonlances for the first time, and we get a sort of a side tale between him and Flint and Fizban and Taz about the dragonlances not actually being magical at all, and it's their faith in them that actually makes them work, which is total BS in my opinion. But ultimately, I've got to be honest, I enjoyed this novel. I enjoyed reading it a lot. The only things that drug this novel down were when Sargaz stepped in. I loved his experience as a slave and getting to work with the Minotaurs. I didn't really like him working against the other humans because, again, everything in Dragonlance in this era is racialized. And so the Minotaurs are enslaving other humans. Why would this one rando human decide to side with the Minotaurs and not his own people? I understand stuff like that happens in real life. It's called Stockholm Syndrome. But it doesn't seem like it was long enough. And then I guess I would understand, you're faced with a god, and the only, god that you know about. Of course, that would be humbling, and then, of course, you would want to serve that god. So I get that aspect of it. It gives him a form of honor, and we get to see that form of honor deteriorate and be twisted and sort of knot up inside of him until he realizes that that's not really honor at all, and he witnesses these other, like the Knight of Solamnia, Oh, I can't remember the dude's name. Well, anyway, he witnesses other Knights of Salamnian, sees their version of honor, and actually becomes more connected with that. He meets Gilthaz, from the Prince of Quantity, and Gilthanas, I should say, and then ultimately becomes friends with Gilthanas. Spends a lot of time in working with the Quantity elves, and we see this sort of evolution of a character from really, really humble, disturbing roots to becoming this individual who really just wants to live a normal life and have his own blacksmith shop and be separated from war and everything. He just wants to make a living, and that's it. And it's such a relatable way of looking at the world, because that's what all we want to do. We want to live our lives without being bothered by other people. We want to have a a profession that can sustain us as an individual, so that we can enjoy our off time and hobbies and families and friends on our own terms without having to worry about these greater machinations in the world. So I understand his motivations. It's very, very mundane. I know that can sound like a negative word, but I'm not using it in that context at all. It's just normal. He wants a normal life. And the world around him, because he's a man of destiny, refuses to allow it. So he's always haunted by his past, and he's always looking toward a normal life in the future, and he is clearly incapable of being able to do it. He can't even find a relationship because he realizes his lifestyle is so aberrant to what would be required in a relationship. And so, he's had like a couple trysts with women in the novel, but that's kind of it for him, which kind of makes me feel bad for him because everyone needs loving, is all I'm going to say. And so, there's going to be women that understand. There's wives of blacksmiths. You can find someone, Theros, especially in Solace. It's like the crossroads of people. You'll meet someone, man. Just hang in there. You've got it. I really enjoyed the book. I think Don Perrin did a really great job. Is it Don Perrin? Yeah. Did a really great job actually writing it, and his use of the military industrial complex, as it were, as a motivating drive for Theros Ironfeld's character arc was interesting, and it kept me engaged the whole time up until the point where Sargas stepped in again and had that like ring of gods around him when he was ready to die. I just thought that was so stupid. Like, what are you doing? It was a huge, wonderful thing when Goldmoon saw the statue come to life for a moment of Mishakal, and like her connection in discovering gods, and he was just shown him. Like the gods just appeared to him, just like, boop. How's it going, man? I'm a god. And these are the other gods, and there's good gods and neutral gods and bad gods, and you've got to choose one. Like, what? Why is it so obvious for him? Like, in this era, it should be a complete and utter mystery. He should not have a god like walking up, hey, good job, little human. You saved one of my seafaring. All right. Thanks, dude. So strange. Just out there. All right, so what are you guys thinking here? Chris, thanks for tuning in. You love the book so much, gives you so much context to the character when you read Chronicles. You always found it interesting the Minotaurs utilize slavery themselves, given their own history of being enslaved. Well, that's why. And that's what I love about this. In life, we repeat patterns that have happened to us. And so when there's abuse, unfortunately, mental or physical or sexual, that unfortunately tends to then repeat the pattern of abuse. When there's violence, you tend to repeat the pattern of violence. And so for the Minotaur nation as a species being, in Toleda's having carved out a semblance of a world and an empire in the most literal sense, and then coming down to Ansalon and being enslaved immediately and repeatedly throughout their entire history, they separate from their distant history, and they have to carve out a new way for their own species to identify itself. And for the evil gods, and certainly their patron god Sargas, slavery is not an evil, it's a way of life, it's a reality. And so they adopt what was once their downfall or degeneration from their imperial roots into a slave race. Then they just start slaving because that's what they know culturally. And so and that's how it works in the world right now. We have active slavery right now in this world. And really, it's the worst version of that is economic slavery, but it is real and it is happening all over the world, even here in our country, the United States. And so that's a reality of existence. And I like the truth behind that. I don't like the idea of it. I think it sucks, and I don't like that it exists and that it's a continuous thing. But I like that this novel is picking up that reflection of patterned behavior, learned behavior, and carrying it through a whole species of people. So I found that interesting. Morgoth was a great villain, charming, paid a soldier as well. Yeah, and I can't help but think, Chris, Morgoth was patterned a little bit after Kitiara, you know? I mean, not in the timeline of the War of the Lance, but when Don Perrin wrote this, we had already had the entire character arc of Kitiara and how she was so successful with her dragon army and able to do the Blue Ladies' War was because she was charming and respectful of her soldiers and paid them well and on time. And so that pattern of behavior, I think Don Perrin picked up on and then ultimately applied to Morgoth because this was written well after all of those were released. And so I can't help but see that pattern. And I think it's a good way of fleshing out an evil character. Make them not completely evil. Give them a perspective. Give them just reasonings. And you'll be surprised at how many people follow them. Let's see. Good morning, Jason. Thanks for tuning in. Corey, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Great to see you. Your favorite part of the book was how Theros experienced multiple cultures, elves, minotaurs, etc. That's why he was sympathetic to others. People who travel the world tend to be more accepting. Yeah, and this is another thing that is reflected in real life. In my personal experience, the most close-minded and bigoted people I've ever met have never left their areas. Because once you do step out into the world, you quickly realize that everyone is the same. And we all have the same motivations and the same dreams and desires. We all share very, very similar experiences. And the world itself is very much the same no matter where you go. And once you have that perspective, you can't be close-minded and bigoted to everything because you see how much you are like all other people. And so if you were closed-minded and bigoted, you would be that to yourself. And there are some, stupid people who just can't see past the end of their noses, and that's an unfortunate reality. But most people who do travel, who do experience other regions and cultures and religions and political views, ultimately realize that, yeah, it's okay to disagree. It's not a personal affront. And yeah, live and let live. Like, as long as you leave me alone to do what I want to do, I'm going to leave you alone to do what you want to do. That's what Theros ultimately comes to understand and wish that he could live in that type of a world. And I think that's just through personal experience how most people experience life. It did break canon a bit because it made them seem that Theros came to Solace right before the companions returned, but you seem to recall that he was established in Solace for years. Yeah, I mean, the reality is each of these books has their own sort of versions of truth. Like, Theros was first a slave, but then he also, worked with them. And so, depending on the story that you hear about his history, his experience with the elves in the modules was slightly different than his experience with the elves in the novel. The time that he came to Solace was slightly different from the novels and modules. And that's just what happens. If you've gotten to this point in the Dragonlance stories as they've been released, you have to accept discrepancies. It's just a reality. So, some are more egregious than others, but you just have to say, all right, well, this is Don Perrin's version of Theros, and this is how this version of Theros, lived. And I just have to accept that and move on, because that's just how it works, Tarek, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in live. Theros is an awesome character. Yeah. I really loved it when he showed up at the Whitestone Council and just broke the Whitestone with the Dragonlance. It's just like, booyah, suckers. Look what I did. And what are you supposed to do to that? It's a sacred stone since time immemorial. And dude just busted it in half with a dragonlance. He could have walked in and just been like, hey guys, look what I got. But he was like, hey, hold my beer. Check this out. Just planting a flag. Fun reading through the entire saga and finding hidden gems like this. Too many cooks. Hey Goof, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Despite the flaws, you love it. Yeah, me too. Clearly. We all do, clearly. We're obsessive about this. And it's okay. We don't mind the little discrepancies and the breaking in canon and stuff. It gives us something to talk about and just sort of rant about and just have a little bit of fun. In this case, on a Sunday morning. Nice and casual right before Memorial Day. If you like Dragonlance stories in general, if you like war stories in general, if you like slavery stories, like getting out of slavery and marking a name for yourself, if you like Theros Ironfeld as a character or the War of the Lance era, you should definitely read this book. It's one of the better ones. It's not great, but it's definitely one of the better Warriors series novels. I think Marqués de Carthon is probably better, but I still enjoyed this a lot, and I would encourage you to check it out if you do enjoy Dragonlance. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in live. I really appreciate you. That is going to do it for my review of Theros Ironfeld by Don Perrin. What did you think of the reveal of Sargaz? Do you like Theros' slave origins? And finally, do you think the Warrior series is entertaining, or is it just too derivative? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga. Thank you so much for joining me in that celebration. So until next week, because I got a game next week, and I'm almost through with Knight of the Rose, so I've got to review that too. Slán Javar. Yes, Corey, eventually I will.